Hey, it's Gory Corey. I'm currently working on a new horror anthology called Welcome Week with Screenager Productions, the minds behind Satan's Servant. We're making a film about the horrors of college, and we're bringing together college age film students from all over the world to work on it. We're currently fundraising on Indiegogo and would really appreciate your support. Whether it's sharing or donating, anything helps. Thank you so much, and if you'd like to learn more, you can find us on Indiegogo at Welcome Week, or you can visit my blog, gorycorey.com. Thanks.
As you watch the screen, your heart begins to beat faster. There's a fluttering in the pit of your stomach. Your throat is dry. Your palms damp. Suddenly a chill runs down your spine. You clutch the person next to you. You tell yourself, it's only a movie. It's only a movie. But sooner or later, it's time to go home.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay, and I'm excited to welcome to the show Matt Bledsoe, host of the Film Feast podcast. Matt, welcome to Film Strip. Tell folks a little bit about yourself and your show.
Well, Jay, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Happy to be here. So yes, I host the Film Feast podcast, which, there are many movie podcasts out there, but we just have conversations every week. Episodes come out weekly on Mondays, and every week is a different guest and me talking about usually a different movie or a whole topic or lists or things like that. And just talking movies, very conversational, very loose. Yeah, I mean, it's just fun for me because I needed an outlet to talk about movies with people who really love movies. And I found so many great people through social media, and they're nice to meet guests on my show. Like, you've been a guest, and yeah, it's a blast. So yeah, it's just a fun time talking about movies. We try to be positive most of the time over there. So yeah, it's really nothing too fancy. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy the show. And like I said, I had a chance to be on your Unscottable series where you're doing Tony Scott movies. I think we talked about Enemy of the State, which was a lot of fun. But we talked about a lot more than that in that show. But you've had Carmelita Valdez McCoy, who's been on our show several times, on yours, and several others. And so just a fun time, and glad to have you here to talk about Blade, starring Wesley Snipes, Stephen Dorff, Inbush Wright, Donnell Logue, and Chris Christopherson, based on the Marvel comic by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan. Written by David S. Goyer and directed by Stephen Norrington. Released in 1998 on a $45 million budget. Grossed over $131 million at the box office. Definitely a cult classic. And as is generally the rule here with the guest, first time you picked it. So, Matt, what's your background with Blade?
Oh, man, Jay, I love Blade so much. It's probably like a top 25 all-time movie for me. And I know I've seen better movies, but few movies mean more to me than Blade. Because I saw Blade in the theaters in 98 when I was just being allowed to see rated R movies. I can't remember exactly what month it came out, but I was either 10 or 11 when it came out. And it was one of the first art movies I've seen in movie theater. And I thought it was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. Like, I was just like, movies will not get cooler than this. And a year later I saw The Matrix and I walked out and said, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. But at that point I was just blown away by Blade. It was one of the first DVDs. Actually, it was one of the first 3 DVDs I ever bought. It was That, X-Men from 2000, and The Matrix, which is a pretty good
That's trio. A great collection right there, yeah.
Good way to start off on DVDs. And yeah, I mean, I watched it obsessively. I throw it on, I'd put on the commentary. I put it on this and Blade 2 I've watched so many times, and I just watched it nonstop. I don't know. I think it was just the style of it. I love Blade as a character. He's like one of the coolest characters ever, and Wesley Snipes pulls it off like so effortlessly. Like, there's guys sometimes that you watch trying to be action stars and they're just not convincing, and Wesley Snipes is so convincing. Blade. It's like it's amazing. And yeah, so a movie that I've seen countless times since it came out. I don't even know, and it's very near and dear to my heart. I really love it.
That's awesome. I mean, I remember when this came out because at that point I was in the latter stages of college, but I'd become a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So anything vampire I was into, and I was like, ninja vampires, Wesley Snipes, sweet, because I liked Wesley. I'd seen him in a lot of stuff, and I thought, okay, yeah, this looks kind of cool. Well, what's Chris Christopherson doing there? Oh, just being a weird old man again. So, all right, I'm down. And I didn't know anything else. Steven Dorff is a face that I've known through the years, but I didn't really know him from anything at that point. And I didn't know this was a comic thing at all. I paid no attention to any of that. That's not really a big part of my pop culture lexicon other than like the mainstay, like superhero stuff. And so I didn't know anything about it. I went and saw it in the theater and I was like, this is friggin' cool. Like all this blood and, gore and action flying around. You had it's definitely got the late 90s, early 2000s techno meets steampunk new metal soundtrack going on. You got all of that, and I was just down for the aesthetic. I was like, man, this is cool, and it had such quotable lines, and motherfuckers always trying to ice skate uphill. I use versions of that at work. I usually censor it, but I mean, I use it all the time. Like, it's a great line, and I loved all of it, but I didn't know anything else about it. Didn't really follow it beyond just seeing it that one time in theaters. I think it came on like cable or something. I'd watch it again, but didn't pay any attention to it. When the sequels came out, I rented Blade 2. I didn't see it in the theaters. I liked it. I've only seen Blade Trinity once, and that's probably once too many times. I'm not a big fan of that one. Don't really love it, but it's got its issues. I understand, but this movie though picked off in a big way because it's hard to think about late 90s anything to do with vampires, and it kind of always goes back for me to Buffy, but this was a year right after that, and the comic of course predates it. But I remember when they made this like a Spike TV show for a while and stuff, and I watched that. I was like, wow, I watched a few episodes of it. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, it lent itself well to the format, and this was years before Marvel got their TV properties together at all. So you imagine if they could do that again, like that would be great. And I understand they're trying, but yeah, that's my background with this. Didn't know much more about it and haven't revisited it a lot. So when you brought it up, I said, you know what? Yeah, that one's kind of missing in the film strip lexicon here. It'd be a good one to do. It's a great way to kick off Shocktober. We're trying to do another sort of random set of stuff here for the October month. And I thought, yeah, we need like a good action / horror movie. I don't know how horrific this is, more than it's got a lot of gore in it and it's a horror character, but it's definitely an action movie. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've never really thought of it as a horror movie. It has horror beats, but it's not like the part when Bushy Wright is down in that kind of cave with her former coworker, and the Donald Logue stuff when he's completely burned from head to toe is like kind of a horrifying image. But that's a great jump scare when he pops up off the table. I remember people like jumping out of their seats in the theater even. So it has horror beats, but I mean, it's just so cool. It's just so action heavy and like hard to feel scared when Wesley Snipes is around kicking the crap out of vampires.
I know, right? Like, yeah, he does bring the ease into the room a little bit because he is just he's so cool. He's kind of the modern day Richard Roundtree, Shaft type character and stuff like that. And I've always kind of felt like Wesley, if he hadn't had his tax problems, would have had a totally different career than what he's had and stuff. But I mean, a really good action star. I've never seen him in something where I thought he gave a bad performance. He hasn't always been in great movies, but I always felt like he gave something every time he hit a role, even if he was just being his kind of disassociated flat self.
Blade Trinity might have some words about his performance.
As I would say, I think he was mailing that in about as hard as they could. But
you heard the story about him refusing to like open his eyes. And they had
the CGI the eyes. Yeah, those are some. The only more horrific CGIs are the kid in the Twilight movies that they do. Like those are horrendous eyes. But otherwise, this holds up some bad eyes. But no, I'm glad we're able to talk about it here. I'm going to jump through a plot summary real quick that we get into the movie. So Blade, played by Wesley Snipes, obviously, is a daywalker, a vampire-human hybrid that allows him to operate in day and night with all the strength of his vampire foes that he fights, but he also has to fight the urges they have as well. So he and his compatriot Whistler, played by Chris Christopherson, are waging a war against the vampires using weapons based around their creatures' historic weaknesses of sunlight, silver, and garlic. One of those I did not realize was a vampire weakness. We'll get into that. So when hematologist Karen Jensen is attacked by a vampire at a hospital, Blade takes her to receive care from Whistler. And meanwhile, the vampire world is dealing with its own internal power struggle between the Council of Pureblood Elders and the younger vampires led by a vamp named Frost, played by Steven Dorff, who's trying to incite a war with the humans. Frost intends to use a ritual to summon the blood god La Magra using the blood of the elders. And Karen discovers a vaccine that can cure those bitten by vampires, but will also destroy already turned vamps, which will make a powerful weapon and maybe even a cure for Blade's thirst. Frost and his gang attack, Whistler's infected, Karen's abducted, and after helping Whistler die, Blade goes on the attack, but is shocked to find that his mother, who he thought died at giving birth to him, was still alive, and it was Frost who bit her in the first place. Blade is subdued and drained of blood as part of Frost's ritual. Karen allows Blade to drink from her, though, which quickly speeds up his recovery. Blade blows through the vampire minions and even dispatches his own mother in the attack. Frost completes the ritual and assumes the power of La Magra, and he and Blade face off, with Blade injecting all of Karen's synthesized vaccine into Frost, causing him to explode. And Blade asks Karen to refine the serum, not for his cure, but so he can continue his crusade against the vampires as credits roll. And that's the through line of the movie. A lot more goes on. We can get into it as we go, but I gotta say, I love how this movie dumps us right into the opening of this, pregnant woman going into labor. Obviously, something bad's going on, and she's got the, quote, unknown infection. We know immediately, like, oh yeah, she's been bitten by a vampire. And they're going to play with something here that I see played in other vampire lore, is that not only getting bitten by a vampire where they drain your blood does something, but there's like a venom side of it too that infects your body, your system.
Yeah, it's funny because I always think there's like more. I always think it opens with the like blood club kind of scene. I forget the little. It's very quick with him and the thing with his mom, and they don't give you much. I love this is a hero origin story that is so light on the typical like origin story beats. It's like you're just kind of with Blade as like a fully formed character, and they basically give you like, yeah, his mom was bitten. When she was pregnant with him, boom, and then you're kind of caught up. You don't need much. Yeah, they do a lot of stuff that's interesting with vampire lore too. Like you mentioned, they bring in Silver, which I'd always associated with werewolves.
Yeah.
And now I just totally buy that. I was on board. I was like, sure, Silver, great. And like, it's fun. Never heard that in my life about vampires. But after Blade, I was like, yeah, Silver. And yeah, the thirst and the venom and like how there's just all this stuff. I mean, like the whole thing with like there's pure blood vampires, and then there's the ones that were turned. And like I could imagine if vampires are real, pure bloods would look down on the ones that were like turn. It's like almost like being born into money versus becoming rich, I feel like, or something, it's
right.
It's like, well, I was born into this wealth, it's like, so I can imagine there would be a real, we'll get into, I love all the vampire world stuff. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, that's what's interesting here is we can jump into it with the bad guys here in this, and really Stephen Dorff as Frost. He's leading like this youth insurrection against the old guard. It's almost like the younger members of the company really trying to push the old ones out of the way so they can run things. And I don't know, when I saw this in 1998, again, I'm Gen X, I'm totally disaffected by everything anyway by nature. And so I'm watching this, I'm going like, yeah, man, forget the man. I'm kind of on Frost's side. I'm like, I don't give a dang who these old people are. Like, who don't care? You can die. Like, whatever, go away. Which I didn't throw him in the intro, but that is a great drop of him just showing up in this as one of the elders that gets whacked early. And I don't know, I really dug it. And I dug that the motivation for Frost is, I'm going to start a war with the people because I need like an endless supply of blood, because I'm building this big vampire army, because I'm tired of skulking around in the shadows. There's no reason for us to do that. We have all this power. Let's use it, versus, no, we need to be calm. It's almost a little bit of the riff that Mike Myers takes in the Austin Powers movies with Dr. Evil and his son. It's almost like, no, we're going to let Scott Evil go like, no, let's just shoot him. Let's get the gun. We'll just shoot him, and I feel like the elders are playing the Dr. Evil like, no, you have to do it, a certain way. And but it's neat that has like, it has nothing to do with Blade or what's going on. They didn't even care about him. He brings the problem to them. They're like, who is this? Like, this is not what I'm trying to do something else over here, man. And I think that's neat though. And it's also a gamble, because when you're doing origin story, right, that you got to give them like a villain to work off of immediately. Right. And it's almost like Blade goes and picks his villain. Like no, I'm going to go pick my problem, and then it's going to be, a problem. And I don't know, I found that story beat to be interesting. And I don't know how well that relates to what the comic origin is, but I think it's a great tone for this movie.
Yeah. Also, I should mention, because you brought it up too, I had like no history with the comics. I knew Blade was a character in Marvel Comics, but I mean, this was the late 90s. And I don't. Anyone I think is probably lying to you if they were saying like I was a huge Blade comic book fan. Like he's a B-level character at that time. I knew him more from there was a '90s Spider-Man cartoon show that I was a big fan of, and he kind of popped up on that a few times. So that's how I was like. I had a big like Marvel encyclopedia of like all their characters, and I would like read it obsessively, and like I would know characters but never read their actual books. So it was like I knew about people and then go, oh, there they are. But like, yeah, just the history of Blade being very obscure, and then he's this big movie. But yeah, and then back to what you were saying about the whole kind of plots kind of converging here, because Blade obviously is hunting vampires and kind of they're having their own power struggle and but then I guess eventually they need him because they need Daywalker's blood to get Lamagra back, basically. But it is kind of funny how it all kind of converges, like you said. Like he's doing his own thing, and then Blade just like inserts himself into it because he's trying to kill vampires.
And the way he does is through what I also would remember as the opening scene of this movie is that rave club where the sprinklers open up, and I've been to a few rave clubs back in the day, many, many days ago. And I remember like, it was always like some kind of gimmick, right? It was going to be foam. It was going to be water, whatever. But I'm watching the music pulse and all this stuff. And they start dropping the blood. And I'm like, most of these people don't realize they are the meal, and then all hell starts breaking loose. And then Blade comes in and talk about an awesome action sequence. And I mean, I know Wesley Snipes is known for his stunt work and his martial arts, and he's incredible here. And the cinematography and the stunt work here is fantastic. Like I had forgotten how fun it is and how cool it is to watch him just blow through this club of vampires here.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought this up. I could spend like conservatively 2 hours talking about the opening of this movie because this is one of the best character introductions you could ever hope to have for your big action hero. I think it's one of my favorite openings to a movie ever. I know there's a couple things beforehand, but this really is like the opening in the Blood Club, and like the build up is so great. That music, that like techno score is still stuck in my head to this day, like the doom, and like, and I think it's like it seems like there's one human guy in this club amongst vampires, which is a terrifying scenario. This guy got taken there, and then how the crowd parts and Blade is standing there, and you're like, holy shit, who is this? And then some idiot challenges him. It was like Daywalker, and then just go, and then he just starts wrecking people. It's like, as again, 10-year-old me was like losing his mind because it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Just because you could imagine this guy could take on like 50 people with no problem. And
it immediately establishes that he's got all the supernatural abilities of the vampires, but he's obviously fighting on not their side. Right. And when he breaks out that sword, I was like, oh yeah, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that the sword was a big part of it. Obviously Blade, the name, but I forgot how cool it looked because it reminds me so much of Highlander sword, that Japanese sword, which is actually, I think, Connery's sword in the movie that he inherits. But I love that blade and the way it looks, and I just love everything about it. And again, how he just tears through these things. And it's also neat, too, that the vampires, again, are not really waging a war with him, but they are acutely aware of what he is the minute he walks in the door. So you set up a world without having to do a ton of dialogue. And that's a hard thing to do. This movie's 2 hours long, but if it was made today, Matt, it would be 2 hours and 45 minutes. They would spend so much time setting all this up. And I love how they just let it be told through the visuals here that like they know who he is. They call him a name. You're going to learn what that is later. And clearly they could sense him, smell him, whatever. They know like that is not one of ours. And that's also not bait. So why are you here? And he just goes through them like he's cutting through butter, and it's awesome. I love a great fight scene like that, and it's hard to do fight scenes in crowds. I've seen it done a few times really well. Michael Mann does a great version of this in the club scene in Collateral, if you've ever seen that.
God. I love that club scene in Collateral. Yeah.
Tom Cruise just kicks so much ass in that scene. And this is very similar to that. I'm like, this feels very much in that same vein, that kind of stuff. It's hard to do that and make it work. But, and I don't know Stephen Norrington from a whole lot of anything else, but what a great job directing something very complicated right at the beginning of the movie, and I know he used to work with like Stan Winston and stuff like that, but I don't know his work that much.
He doesn't have many actual director credits.
No.
And I think before this even, and I think, after this, I don't know what he did. I don't think there's anything between. I can't remember. He does, the Notorious Bomb League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which I saw in the theater, was not as good as Blade, and that never, as far as I can tell, like never really worked again. Maybe directed like maybe a TV show or thing here and there, I can't remember, but but Blade, you would think he's a super talented guy, and not to say he's not a talented guy, but like I wish he had done more movies because. Yeah, I mean, he directs the shit out of Blade. Like, and that's like you're saying, like the opening with that crowd, like it's all like basically nonverbal. There's some whisperings of people are like they're whispering, "Oh, Daywalker, Blade," and like you can tell how the crowd reacts to him. You know, he's a big deal, and like they're pretty scared of him. Except that and they try to attack him, but you know, and it's like there's chaos going on in the club. People are running around. He's still messing people. Security kind of comes out. He's messing them up. He seems like he's having fun hunting vampires, killing vampires. I love that too. It's like there's even a little more of that in Blade 2 where he's like a little looser and a little more fun. But I love how he just seems like this is sport for him. Like this is like, and he does all these little things that I love. Like in the club scene when Donald Logue walks out with a couple more guys and he's like, get him, fuck him up. And then Blade takes a sword and like draws like a line on the ground, basically. I guess basically cross the line basically and just messes those guys up too. I mean, there's just, with Wesley Snipes playing Blade, there's so many little like non-verbal things that he does as a character that I love, like so many little moves because he's not a very talkative character.
No,
but this one's more in Blade 2. Del Toro, who directed Blade 2, talks about how Wesley Snipes so good at hitting like comic book hero poses, like without even being told to. He instinctually just like hits these like moves and poses and little things that just are so cool. He does that in Blade 1 too, where he's just like all these little nonverbal things he's doing that just like, add to the character.
He's a human action figure.
Exactly.
And I used to think about him in the 90s, if they could ever get a live action G.I. Joe together during then, he would be a killer Snake Eyes. Like, because you don't want him to talk a whole lot. In fact, the less Wesley talks in movies, probably the better. He's actually not that great at line delivery, but he's great at pose. He's great at action. He can tell through the physicality. And I was like, man, he would have killed in that role. Like, he would have been amazing in that. And I know it goes against the origin of Snake Eyes, but it'd been cool to have a black guy be Snake Eyes. Like, that'd be kind of sweet. So,
yeah.
I mean, like, why not? I mean, who cares at this point? And but I love that too. And I love that they never called any of that out. They just let this be. And it's one of the cool things I always loved about Buffy was the diversity in the cast, and they never like made a thing about it. It was just a thing, it just happened. And I feel like the 90s were the best time of movies when you could just have that character and you didn't have to like put a big neon sign over it the way you do today, and stuff. And in this, he's just rolling through it. And I love it that he's also got to run from the cops though too, because they're like, well, 5-0, gotta go. Yeah. And so he's going full with that. And the police's answer to this is to take one of the vampires to the hospital. That's hilarious to me. I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, good on that vamp for faking it out to that point, but that's when the real story like cranks into overdrive here, and he kills Dr. Webb, who's working with the hematologist Karen Jensen, and Boucher Wright is a really fascinating actress for me. And she's wound up in so many cool roles through her years. And I don't ever think she's gotten her like full due. I really came onto her in the Brooks Brothers, or Hughes Brothers movie rather, Dead Presidents in 1995. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's a tremendous film. It's a very challenging film. But if you liked the most recent Michael Bay ambulance thing, I would definitely tell people go watch Dead Presidents because it's the prequel to Ambulance that you didn't know you had. And just seen her in different things through the years, but I find her so captivating and fascinating in this role because she could play this so many different ways, Matt, and she doesn't play the damsel in distress. She also doesn't play the too cool for the room female character, stereotypical. She's very much in the middle, and they ask her to do so much. She's got to carry the audience's POV into all of this world, and she's got to have this big arc where she's creating the super serum thing. And she's kind of this stand-in for Blade's mother that we won't get until much later when Sanaa Lathan rolls back into the movie.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, man, I really don't think I've seen her in much else. I haven't seen Dead Presidents in, like, a very long time. I caught it on TV, like, 15, 20 years ago when I was younger. And, like, I liked it. But, yeah, I can't think of much I've seen her in. But she's talented. And I feel like she plays the character just very, like, determined. I don't think there's, like, a lot of woe is me and be bitten by a vampire. And they do put her in damsel in distress because she gets kidnapped by Frost at one point. But the whole time she just feels very determined. I feel like she's determined to make a cure for herself. She's determined to do all this stuff. And she gets her own little kind of scene with her ex coworker and that pit we had talked about, and like yeah, so she's very capable. I feel like it's not like a woman just screaming her head off, damsel in distress, like help me, you know. It's like she's gonna try to help herself first, and yeah, she's strong in the role. I like it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you have to have this kind of worldly human sidekick for your otherworld superhero in some ways. You know, you have
Right.
Vicky Vale for Batman, right? You have Lois Lane for Superman, and those sometimes play love interests and stuff. So you don't necessarily need that in this, but you need somebody else in the real world besides
Right.
Whistler who can be an ally, right? And I love that they set all that up. And again, for a movie that again is 2 hours long, they have a lot going on in this, and you really got three plots going. You got Blade and his whole situation. You've got the vampire arguments that we'll get back into in a second. Then you've got what Karen is doing alongside of Whistler, right? And I just think it's neat to balance that out. That's not an easy thing to do, and I give a lot of credit to the screenwriter Goyer, and David Goyer is really, really, really good at adapting comic books. He was a comic book writer for one thing, so he understands the medium. But I mean, this is the guy that wrote all of your favorite Dark Knight trilogy stuff from
Right.
Christopher Nolan.
Right.
Nolan gets a lot of credit for the direction, as well he should. But Goyer wrote those movies with Nolan's brother. Like Nolan's
Right.
brother writes the dialogue. Goyer knows how to write the beats. And he's just really, really smart with the way he writes stuff. And it's very efficient while telling very dense story. And that's not an easy thing to do. And so when you introduce Karen here and Blade comes in to take her back to his safe house, the part of the movie that always gives me a chuckle is anytime Chris Christopherson stumbles onto a set like this. And at this point, I'm like, did he even know what he was in? Like, what kind of movie he was in? It's like, what the hell am I again? Okay. You know, it's like watching Walter Matthau do a Star Wars movie or something. You know, it's just like, this is not who I would necessarily pick for this to be the quote watcher type person, because that's my point of reference for a lot of this kind of stuff. But I kind of go with it because Chris Christopherson, for people my age, like I remember him from his 70s and early 80s stuff when he was playing truckers and, you know, rednecks and all this stuff, the things he really is in life. And by the way, a lot of your favorite country and Western songs from the 70s and 80s, this cat wrote. Like, y'all don't realize that necessarily, but that's why he's famous. And then he got into acting because why not? And because that's what he does. But he always sort of just plays himself in some way. He's sort of like Sam Elliott, but a little more dime store. And I don't know. There's just something about him as Whistler that I don't ever quite completely allow myself to go like, that's not Chris Christopherson doing these lines, but he has a purpose.
It's funny because I think it's probably my first introduction to Chris Christopherson was him as Whistler. So to me, he was just Whistler, like which is, you know, it's like that just blank slate, like, oh, and he seems so world weary, which is probably just him. I do kind of like people who are like non-actors get into acting, because I feel like there's a lot of rappers like this who like get into acting and they feel so genuine. I don't think they're trying to put any kind of front. They're just coming in and doing the job. And I feel like Christopherson comes in and just plays it like, I'm doing this. I feel like I believe him that he's been hunting vampires forever. He seems very tired of it. He's like, you know, he tells Karen his backstory about what happened to him. He has some great lines too. But I was going to say back to Karen real quick that I forgot she's kind of the audience surrogate. Really, she's like the reason we're getting all things explained to us. Like Blade tells her all the rules of vampires and the whole power structure and what they've been doing. Like, she gets all the information, so we get all the information, which
Exactly.
I don't think feels ham-fisted, because I find so interesting. But when they go over the rules and everything, and I'm just like, well, this is fascinating. So tell me more. But I mean, I love Whistler, and I guess they love Whistler because they messed up because they kill him off, air quotes, in Blade 1, and they have to do some serious, you know, retcon to get him back in 2.
Yeah, when I saw his name in the credits for Blade 2, I was like, oh man, don't do that. You know, like that, it cheapens the death here, because that's what you have to do though with this, and it's something that the Batman movies toy with and never completely go with, is you got to take away the chief ally of the hero at some point, right? Like you got to get him where he can't rely on someone else anymore. He's got to go with what he knows. But I do like Christopherson's sort of exhausted, I'm done with this garbage, I'm too old for this shit kind of performance here. But I mean, it's fun because it works. I mean, again, I never fall out of it and not realize it's him, you know, or whatever. But he does introduce that thing. And I love that they build weapons around the the primary weaknesses of vampires. We talked about how we both didn't know silver was one, but I love how they fashion those things together. I'm always into like the tech of a movie and stuff like that. I think it's just the more, goofy you can get with that, and the more you bother to explain it to me, the more I'm going to dig it, because it looks like something you would try to make on your own or kind of play with as a kid. It's cool to see them fashioning this stuff, because that's the fun part of like any kind of action video game, is the arming up part, or when you get to like, build out your weapons and stuff like that. And I feel like that this is the part of the video game where we're upgrading our skills and we're getting more cool stuff to play with, and that's the fun part of this. And the fact that they've been waging this war, because they both have definitely a bend against vampires. Whistler's family got wiped out by him, obviously. Blade, it feels like he lost his mother to one. We'll find out later that's not the case, but he's cursed with this burden of being a half vampire, but he won't give himself over to his evil, but he'll use the evil to like channel all those rage through and stuff. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. Again, it reminds me of the vampires on Buffy, like Angel and later Spike and some of these others that would sort of use their powers for good and stuff like that. And they had different motivations, obviously, but it's neat to see that they give all that story without spending enormous amounts of time and getting away from the action. Because the thing is, they don't want to get us away from the action. And that's when they cut us to this council of pureblood vampires. And I got to tell you, Steven Dorff is not a great actor, but he is so much fun when he's playing like this smarmy, smart ass, just I'm way cooler than all of you. Watch me be cool and tell you how fucking old all of you are and you need to get out of the way,
He's good at being like a real obnoxious prick. I feel like
yes,
it's like you want to punch him in the face, and like he plays that really well. He does come off as like a real I guess at the time he'd be like a Gen X type person who's like, damn the man, like you said earlier. Like,
yes, no, that's why I'm relating to him. Like, yes, this is me. I feel you.
If only he didn't want to kill all the humans too, but otherwise I'd be on board.
Everybody's got their flaws, Matt.
I think he's a very charismatic bad guy in this. Like,
yes.
He's an interesting actor. I was watching something about Blade before we did this, where someone was saying he didn't like doing mainstream stuff, and like he didn't like superhero stuff, and he just somehow, I think the director convinced him to get into this movie.
It's called zeros on the end of the check, too.
But he does a good job. I feel like he's into it. And it's funny because sorry to reference Blade 2 again, but I know in Blade 2 they mentioned like we felt like Steven Dorff was more of he wasn't quite a physical threat for Blade till the very, very end of the movie, but it's a word. Like he'd be more like the money guy, and he had like a tough, bad guy or like a bodyguard type guy. He's like the final bad guy. He's not really a physical challenge, but he's the one setting all the chess pieces on the board. But like they do talk about, it was a conscious decision, like getting a more physical adversary for Blade, because they really have to like power Steven Dorff up to fight Blade, because otherwise you're like, why couldn't he just murder this guy in 2 seconds?
Right. And to be fair, when he does fight him, even as Lamagre, he does kick his ass pretty fast. Like it's because he's also got like the super weapon to do it with, we'll get to. But I actually like that though, to have this more cerebral villain, where he's not going to get in a fist fight with you. He's going to orchestrate. So it's Joker from the Batman stuff. That's really what it is, because Joker's not a physical threat to Batman in any way, but he can orchestrate all manner of hell, for Batman to go through. Yeah. And that's what makes him formidable. And I kind of appreciate that about this. But I love that, again, that he's got this whole faction of younger vampires that he's constantly playing with this ring. And he just looks so 90s and everything.
Very 90s, yes.
and cool. But he looks at this group of people, and what you realize is that Frost and his kind are the ones that are actually the put upon in the vampire lore. They're not the strong group. They're looked on as, again, like, you're the startup money, you're the .com money, you're not the real Wall Street money, so go away. And that's why you get somebody like Udo Kier, who could just be this Eurotrash, super rich kind of dude over
who's
there.
Played a vampire in a couple movies before.
I know, right? Yeah, it is on the nose stunt casting, but whatever, because it works. Because then you've got Frost, you've got his comic sidekick Logue, Donald Logue is just fun in everything he ever does. Yeah, and again, another actor who doesn't always show up in the best movies, but never gives a bad performance. It's always fun because I think he knows what he's in, and I love the whole piece of how this comes together, and really how Frost's whole thing is like, I'm gonna have to raise this unbelievable force to be able to overthrow the vampires in power. And it gives him a journey to go through too. Cause usually the bad guys in these kind of comic book movies, like their whole plan is, it ranges from like a land grab, like Lex Luthor, or just chaos, or, you don't really know. Like, no, he's actually like trying to get somewhere. He's doing a political coup, and then Blade's just kind of in the way. And that's part of the problem that he has to deal with. So I love that, again, they really have their own developed story. So if they were to have ever taken this story and stretched it into a television series, it wasn't what they did with the TV show. But I'm like, man, this would be a hell of a season, because you're going to have several episodes of just Frost and these elder vampires going at each other and stuff.
Yeah, and kind of Blade figuring out what is going on and maybe the end goal of the Lamagra thing. You could really build up to it over maybe a 6-10 episode series. I feel like, that's a good point. Yeah, it's funny, it's 2 hours. I told him like 2 hours. It's a really brisk 2 hours.
Very, very brisk.
Yeah.
But like we talked about, Blade has to have a human counterpart, whatever. Vampires have them too. I think they call them familiars in this.
Familiars,
yeah.
Interesting concept. Yeah.
But it makes sense, right? That like vampires leading an uprising, who do you pay off? You pay off the press and the cops. Right. So of course it's going to be a cop, and I'm like, well, yeah, I buy it, and that's when Karen gets attacked by him. But that's when they come across the vampire Bible, as it were, and they come across this grotesque vampire Pearl. And that to me is, and the way Blade tortures Pearl with the UV lights, I'm like, man, it makes me squirm to this day, right? Like, to get what they want to, because it feels like I'm watching the old David Lynch Dune, like just some of the grotesque stuff in that. It's just like, oh, this is getting real. Cronenbergish here, which is not bad, but it wasn't what I expected in this movie.
Yeah, it's like the weirdest touch in the whole movie, that vampire. It's like, what is this vampire's deal? Why is it like this? And I love how it's like the most, I think it may be the most sadistic Blade gets, because he's just straight up torturing this thing, and he didn't just, she kills it, I forgot. But they, after they just kind of torture this poor, I gotta feel bad for it, because it's like trapped in a basement, it seems like, and can't go anywhere. But he's apt to kill all vampires, so he hates them all. So don't care if he's stuck in a basement. I remember seeing that, like, that's a really weird, but I appreciate the weird, unique touch, because it's like out of the box. Like, it's just a very strange idea.
It is, but it gives Blade an edge as a hero, as sort of in this anti-hero thing. And they play with this in other formats too. I always thought like the Jack Bauer character in the early seasons of 24 was very much on this. He would just shoot you in the knee and then question you. Like that was Kiefer's whole like super intensity. And Steven Dorff in a lot of ways is kind of a dime store Kiefer Sutherland. If you look at him in a certain way, he just chooses to do other stuff where Kiefer tries to do more mainstream stuff, but when he's not riding horses or playing in his band or whatever. But it's the same thing of like, you don't want your good guy to torture somebody, but you kind of get why maybe he would, because what it reinforces to me as an audience member is that, Blade is on our side, right? He's fighting for us. He's really fighting to keep the vampires from killing all of us. But he's also not exactly like the nicest person. It goes back to a Western trope. Like the gunfighter was usually the gun for hire. Right. They were just, because you paid them, they were your good guy, but they weren't really good people, and but I appreciated that, and there's, that old line, like history is told by the winners of the fight. The reason we know the old K Corral the way we do is because the Earps won the fight. Like, otherwise that'd be a very different story. Like, you can see it. So it's neat to see that here, and to see this guy going through this and watching him torture. Is probably some of Snipes' best acting too, when he's really just, you gonna tell me, instead he's just blowing that light on poor Pearl and all that. But what did you make of the plan to raise up the blood god Lamagra? I was like, is this like a real thing? I didn't bother to look it up, but I was like, that it'd be hilarious that this is what we have to do. We have to be infused by some other great power to take over the powers that be.
I didn't know. I don't know if it was a real thing or anything. I was 10, so I was on board completely. I was like, sure, blood god, Lamagra, great, let's do it. I was very curious. They're talking about the whole movie, what it was going to end up being, like how they're going to show it and how it was going to turn out. So that was kind of I think the curiosity was like, well, what's this blood god going to be? Because they're really hyping it up, and I don't know. I jump ahead, I guess, kind of the ending, but I don't know if you've ever watched the original footage that they shot, what they thought Lamagra was going to look like. Have you seen that?
No.
God. Go fire up your Blu-ray or DVD. I think it's on the Blu-ray. I know it was on the DVD of the original test CGI footage of what they were going to do with Lamagra. It's horrifically bad. It is. I know they didn't finish it. It was like unfinished CGI footage, but the idea was basically like Lamagr was like a blood tornado spinning around in that area, and Stephen Dorff's face like pops out of it, and Blade just staring at this giant blood red CGI swirling.
I'm sitting here at a Google image search as you're saying this, going, "Oh, that would have been a horrendous choice."
It would have been the worst. Like, it would have probably killed the franchise. Like, it's. Yeah. I mean, I know they said it wasn't done, but I can't imagine if they finished it how much better it would have looked. Because I think the idea still was like Stephen Dorff's face popping out of a blood red tornado, and it's like,
that is not.
Yeah. So thank God they kind of went with like still Stephen Dorff, but he's like a powered up Stephen Dorff, and then
right.
Even that CGI is a little dicey. I forgive it, but because there's like demons that pop out of the vampires, and then there's his blood is kind of bubbly. Yeah.
Even so, they still do the tornado around Dorff when he's getting infected or infused or whatever you want to say with Lamagr. So they did keep some of that, but that would have been bad. Wouldn't even look good now. Like, you couldn't render that. Like, the fact that Lamagr is just a big walking blood clot. Like, no, that's not okay. Like,
it's not great visually. Like, it's just it doesn't work. And I'm glad they went against it. Yeah, because now I'm just fine with like, it's Stephen Dorff like powered up by Lamagr or whatever, and then how he kills him is like genius too. I love that.
Oh yeah,
I love that. I mean, and the line helps about some motherfuckers always trying to ice skate uphill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll get into that. I love how we get back to the hideout, then we have to see what Blade does to keep himself in check. Like, he has to constantly inject himself with this drug, but it's losing its effectiveness. Mm-hmm. And it's like anything, like the more you do something, the less effect it's really going to have on you, whatever it might be. Like, if you drink too much caffeine, like at some point, like, it just doesn't have any effect on you, right? And so this for Blade, you see this struggle for him, that he's trying to keep it together. He's not gonna, he don't want to overuse it, but he knows at some point he's going to lose that fight if something doesn't change, and it gives you a little bit of a, I don't know, more sympathy for a guy that, again, we just saw him torture something, even though it is an evil being. It's like, that's not how we really want him to operate, right? But then you see, like, oh man, this guy is like, he's in pain constantly.
Yeah.
And that gives him a more human element than he's just not some super vampire creature thing.
Yeah, I would say it humanized him a little bit, and kind of, because it's otherwise it's like, well, what is this guy's weakness? But he's battling this addiction, which he does not want to give over to, because he does not want to be like the vampires. And it is an interesting wrinkle that they throw in there, and that it's losing effectiveness, and what's he going to do basically, and how's he going to keep fighting that? And that was an interesting idea, because it's funny because they say all of their strengths, none of their weaknesses. It's like, well, one little bit of their weakness is, the thirst. But yeah, I find that idea very interesting, how they add that wrinkle to it, because you need something, I feel like, to kind of humanize him a little bit more.
Exactly. So, what did you make of Karen's whole experimentation sequence and stuff? She's been working on an anticoagulant anyway, but she realizes what she's been working on, when it reacts with vampire blood, boom, like, it's kind of a problem. It's almost a little convenient, but in some way I give the movie that, because I'm like, well, she's got to have some other purpose besides just being the avatar for the audience, and also being the thing in distress at some point, or, Blade's mother figure, whatever you want to call her. Like, I actually like the fact that they give her like an active role in all of this, because at this point, Whistler's about to exit the movie stage left. And so we got to have something, to help Blade out. And I don't know, I dug it. I thought it was actually a smart way to, let's infuse enough science that people could believe this bullshit, but that it's not like too over explained, so we don't have to get too lost in the weeds.
Right. I feel like if you're experimenting with stuff and trying to come up with something, you might come up with something else by accident. That's happened many times in history.
Of course,
like,
right?
I came up with this thing. And I love how they do, they work some real medical science in there. And it's like, I'm like, sure, that sounds right to me. I don't know much about medicine or science, but it sounds good. It's like, anticoagulant. Yeah. And it's like, she stumbles upon this and it works. It's very, very useful, as we see by the end of the movie. But I thought that was very cool, because then when they show it in use, I'm like, well, holy shit, this is amazing. So,
right.
Yeah.
But I love that she's able to synthesize this in a way that she's actually able to cure her own, bite, or anybody else's bites. Like, she can cure people with this thing, and it doesn't work on Blade at first, but she thinks she can get it, right? She's just going to have to just keep working at it or whatever. But it gives him this glimmer of hope. Like, there's a reason to keep her alive. at that point, right? Besides just he's, fighting for good, but like otherwise, who is she to him? At this point,
right.
Like it gives him like an actual reason to do that. And I don't know, I dug it. I thought it was a good character moment and a good plot contrivance. When Frost's gang attacks that hideout, though, I mean, I love it, though. I love that moment in a movie like this where the bad guys get the drop on the good guys, and they just, it all goes to hell. Like, I'm like, well, yeah, everybody about to die. Like, I really thought they'd just kill everybody. Like, the fact that they keep Karen is obviously just bait, but I love that the way they kill Whistler, though, is exactly the way you would kill a dude like that. Like, not just going to kill you, I'm going to make you one of us. Like, that is the most torturous thing you can do to somebody like him.
Yeah, it's like more implied what happens, but it seems horrific what happened to him, and like they tortured him, and I know that it's weird. These like beats in an action movie, usually action movies I love, where it's like the hero is kicking ass for most of the movie, and there's always that point where like something kind of bad happens, like they find his hideout or they capture somebody, he has to go to them, and this has all the beats I love, where it's like they find the hideout, they mess up they take one of his crew, they kill one of his crew, or basically leave him for dead, and then Blade has to basically regroup and go attack them. Like, I love it. Feels like they're invading, like, oh no, it's like this is our safe area, this is our safe space, how'd they find it? It's like a shock, it's like a real shock when they show up. And I do love how he delivers that line too when he comes in. It's like, nice place, took us a while to fucking find it, or something that hits him. Like, it's like the way that Stephen Dorff delivers a line is good. He's a lot of good line deliverers in this, but yeah, that one is pretty good. And you're like, oh shit, what are they gonna do now? Because Blade's not there, so it's like them versus, I don't know, a handful of vampires. And
this is also a movie that lives in the post Scream world, and now snappy dialogue is just a part of everyone's life. Like, this is what we're going to do. Goyer knows how to write this kind of stuff too. I wouldn't be surprised they didn't bring in people that worked on shows like Buffy and stuff like that to punch up the dialogue. They did that all the time. Joss Whedon was a script doctor for years, so for all I know, he did a few lines of this for what we could tell, or some of his people did. But I love that all that gets in Dorff, because you have to have the charismatic guy do that. That's one thing Dorff has. Maybe as an actor, he's not that great a performer, or at least we don't see him give great performances in the stuff he does. But he's got charisma for days, and so the fact that he just ooze this stuff out, and you just buy every bit of it, it makes it fun. And then you give the comic parts to Donald Logue, who's going to always drop the punchline.
Yeah,
and it's perfect. And no, I love this though, the way they take everybody out. It all goes bad, and so of course Blade now is ready. Like, okay, I'm on, but he's got to help Whistler die first. And man, that hurt. I was like, man, do we have to kill the old dude? I mean, I know we do, but I kind of hate that Obi-Wan's got to go like this. Like, this sucks.
It's a tough scene, and it's like basically killing off his surrogate father. Beyond like the guy that makes his weapons and all this stuff. It's like this is basically him. And I love how Whistler, true to his character, is still like basically more pushing it than Blade is. He's like, come on, just he's like, the fuck out of here, basically. Like, because that's Whistler so far. It's like he's a tough guy. So yeah, he's just like, I'll do it. And you hear the gunshot, and then they do it off camera so they can retcon it for two. It's like, it's like we didn't show it so we can get away with it. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough scene. I remember I was really upset. I was like, oh no, I like that guy. It's like he's gone already.
I know, right? Oh. So, but it does get us to the end, which is what we want. And this is the big reveal. Of course, Blade is going to come in to the penthouse, and he's going to just start, doing what he did in the rave at the beginning, except twist, here's your mother. And I'm like, well, now that I did not see coming. I got to say, I did not see Sanaa Lathan walking into this movie, but I'm always glad to see her. I love her as a presence. And I was like, well, now that is a twist I did not anticipate, Frost. That good move.
I didn't see that one coming. Yeah, I remember. I was like, what? And even I, as a kid, found that stuff kind of weird between Blade and his mom. It's like there's some more stuff that almost feels almost romantic.
Very Oedipal. Like, yeah. Well, you got like all kinds of weird stuff, because Frost is technically like his vampire father too. I'm like, there's some
vampire
weird
stepdad he doesn't like. It's weird.
I know. Like the dynamic is weird.
I was like, how? What? I was just really. Yeah, it was a very interesting twist I did not see coming at all. So, that blew me away. I was like, what? How? What? I had so many questions, but yeah, it's very interesting.
But it is the great way to make Blade like stop in his tracks right?
Right.
So because they've got to have his blood, otherwise they're not going to be able to do the ritual. They know that now. So that's how the guy has again blown through your enemies, like they're not there. So how do you disarm them? You got to mentally disarm him in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so that's how they're able to do it. And they get the blood. And I love how they throw Karen in her own pit, like to be devoured by her mentor, the decomposing zombie, whatever the hell that. I didn't understand like his whole thing. I'm like, I thought you turned into a vampire. Like how did that happen? They did not explain that at all. I was like, what? Huh? Like how did
like, yeah, there was like an explanation for that. Maybe in the commentary somewhere where they said like he's like a bottom feeder type vampire, where it's like he's living like a rat or something in that tunnel where they feed him scrap, so he's like really unhealthy, I guess is the way to put it. Like, so he looks terrible, and it's there's a lot of, I guess you could say, inconsistencies with vampires. Sometimes people blow up this way, sometimes they blow up immediately, sometimes they turn really quick, and they don't turn really quickly. There's a lot of different like stuff with the vampire rules that doesn't fully probably check out, but it's like, oh well, it's a fast-paced movie. I don't want to question anything.
I mean, it's almost like they've turned him into like a Renfield type character a little bit from old Dracula a little bit, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I could buy that, but I actually, all the inconsistencies with the vampires and stuff, I just took that as watching it this time as like just the variances in the different versions of vampires that exist. And this is what the elders were talking about, is that there's no consistency among any of you, which is what the old people said to my generation, is what old people always say to the younger generation. It's like, you're never consistent about anything, whatever. And I mean, that's like a theme. And so watching it this time, a lot older than I was, the last time I saw it, or even the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, I get it. I'm like, it's a little ham-fisted of a metaphor, but sure. Like I get it. Like I see what we're trying to say here. This is exactly what Udo Kier said was going to happen. Is all this impulsivity is going to cost all of you, and sure enough, it does. But I love how though Karen's able to take up her own agency. She gets away, right? But Blade is like going down for the count. And this is a trope that they repeated on Buffy in season 3, where there's a point when, spoiler alert for a 20-something-year-old television show, Angel's is losing it, and Buffy says, "No, feed on me," and then like you can power back up, and he does, and that's what rescues him. And I love how she's like, "No, I'll take the chance because I know I can cure myself. Go ahead." And that just jacks him all the way up. And then you get Wesley Snipes in again full rave mode again, where he just starts blowing through these enemies like they're not even there.
Oh, I love it. It's a very specific thing I love in like action movies where like the hero's kind of been down for the count. Either he's been tortured, he's been captured, but there's usually that last beat where he powers back up through some way or gets out basically and just goes on a tear. It's like they put that last obstacle in front of him. And I love how Blade does that here, where it's like he's all weak, but then he drinks the blood and he powers back up, and then he's back to like full kick-ass shape and like just wrecks people. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much Hulk Hogan's whole career. I mean, that is the Hulk match, is to get a few licks in, to take a beating, to look like you're going down, then to Hulk up, a few punches, a boot, and a leg drop, and we're out. I mean, that's Hulk. And I mean, that worked. I mean, it worked huge. We haven't seen another one do it that well since. They've copied it ever since. And he was copying somebody else too. But I mean, nobody did it like that. And
Hulk up moment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It is the Hulk up moment. I mean, Rocky steals it, and does it in the Rocky movies. And Stallone has even copped to that he borrowed that from wrestling, and so that's why he had Hogan in a movie eventually, because he was such a fan. But I mean, I love that though, that he's able to recover and he gets back in it, but Frost still completes the ritual. So it's going to be, okay, we got to go through this. But I think one thing that got me here is the way he kills all these vampires. He even kills his own mother during this, but they don't linger on that. I kind of wanted them to hold on that a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of took it as like, I don't know, that she's not really herself anymore. Like to Blade, if you're a vampire, you're dead to him. He doesn't care if you're his mom or whatever. That's how hardcore he is. If you were his own mom and now you're a vampire, he's like, you know what? Whatever. You're not. I'm gonna. You're dead to me now. Yeah, you're dead to me now. Yeah. That's how serious he is about it. So. Yeah, that whole little thing is still weird, but I totally accept it. I'm like, sure, okay. It's like, and then him just going nuts after that. You're a vampire, your Blade's enemy, basically.
And we've teased it and talked about it. When he kicks all those, or injects Frost with all those syringes, first off, they do get a pretty good fight for a physical mismatch. Like they do a pretty good choreographed fight here. But when he starts flinging those syringes into Frost, and then he karate kicks, roundhouses that other one into his forehead after that great line, I'm like, well, of course, that's exactly how this should end. Now it looks like garbage, the CGI blood explosion, but that's exactly what I knew was going to happen, and I needed that to happen. I needed him to turn into a balloon and pop in front of us and like get all over the walls and shit, because that's what this movie deserves at this point. Because it's, I mean, we've earned that as an audience, and I think Blade had earned that kill as a fighter. And again, I just equated it to, we finally got to the big boss in the video game, and this is what happens at the end of it when you finally do the fatality.
Right. It does look like a Mortal Kombat fatality. It's like someone going to like a blood bubble and then just bursting. But this is the part where I wish our friend Mike Scott was here, because I'm sure he could tell us who the fight coordinator was and all.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, I'm no expert. I am like, there's a lot of people I follow on Twitter who are like action movie experts. They can tell you how the cuts and who the stunt guys were. But I feel like the last fight, when he's fighting all like the bad guys before he even gets Steven Dorff, is such a good like bunch of like fight scenes, so well put together. I think it's shot really well. I feel like the thing Wesley Snipes is so good with the physicality, because he's a legit karate expert. I think there's like Aikido was another one. He's a real, and like a black belt. Like he's like serious about this, and you can tell. And I know he rarely used a stunt double, and that goes a long way when you're watching the actor like actually do the stuff. Like,
yeah, it's not close-ups of the face and then zooming back to the stunt guy doing it. It's actually watching Wesley do the stuff. No, I agree with you that it makes it as cool as watching somebody like Scott Adkins or somebody else that you know is actually doing the stuff. It's what makes the movie Backdraft so awesome, because you realize Kurt Russell and Scott Glenn are actually doing the firefighter shit in that movie, and and Billy Baldwin too. And I'm like, well, you know, I give them credit for that stuff. Like those guys talked about how hard that was, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I love when I see the actors like do the stuff. I mean, if they already can just naturally, if they're great martial artists and they do it on film, it's like, I really care about that kind of stuff. And that's what, I mean, not to get too much into it, but they're rebooting Blade with Mahershala Ali, who is a wonderful actor, 2-time Academy Award winning actor. The only thing I worry about is I don't know his like fight background. And like, to me, Wesley Snipes' Blade is like irreplaceable. Like, I'm excited for Mahershala Ali's Blade because I'm what they do with it, but this is one of those few roles where I cannot imagine anybody else playing the part. It's really tough for me. And it's mostly Wesley Snipes' like physicality that he brings to the role, because the way he moves, the way he fights, like, that just seems really, really hard to replicate, honestly. Like,
it would be. Yeah, it's fine. Maybe they're going with like an older, more like wiser Blade or something. I'm curious that, because I didn't know he was going to be cast in the reboot, but that sounds amazing. So I could have told you like get somebody like Daniel Kaluuya or something like that, but he's kind of aging out of that type part of his career now and stuff. So an incredible actor, by the way. But and maybe if Chadwick Boseman was still with us, he could probably kill in this. I mean, he would be pretty impressive. He may not do it. It may not be what he would want to do, but he might have. I mean, he played a damn linebacker one year in a NFL movie, which I love. I love Draft Day.
I love Draft Day too, actually.
Yeah, I know. That's my pre-April watch, like right before the actual NFL draft. And I don't care how dumb it is; it's fun. So I love that stuff.
I've watched it on the first day of the NFL draft before, so I'm corny too. I'm like, it's a very watchable movie. It is insanely watchable. It's so much fun.
Very
I mean, I think the MCU rule would be like, if Chadwick Boseman was still alive, well, you're Black Panther, you can't be Blade 2, you can't play 2 roles in the MCU. But I just think, again, like, I think the whole thing works because Wesley Snipes is Blade. I don't know if we would talk this movie if it was like, I think the original plan was the early 90s to LL Cool J. LL Cool J is cool, but he's
kind of a little too jacked to be Blade.
Too jacked, yeah.
And I don't know how good he can move. Like he's
right.
He could snap the lines off, but you know, I mean, he's an action guy. I mean, in the action movies he's done, like I particularly think about like in SWAT, like he's actually running the dude down and like knocking him over. And he did a lot of stuff in Any Given Sunday. He's a physical guy, but he's not a martial artist.
Like too happy to be Blade.
A little bit, yeah.
You know, the funny thing is, Wesley Snipes can do comedy so well. Like White Man Can't Jump. He's so over the top and funny in like Demolition Man.
Yes. Yeah. You go listen to the archives of that in Film Strip, folks. Yeah, Brian and I had a good time with him as Simon Phoenix. Yeah. So.
Him is like, that character is like night and day to Blade, because he's so fast mouth talking as Simon Phoenix, and is so much more showy. And this, he's so stoic and
the brooding and all of it. Yeah,
brooding. But I like most of his line deliveries because they're just so, like, even the way he says Whistler is great to me. He's like, Whistler, like, it's
again, it's Richard Roundtree. It's cool. It's infinitely cool to watch him do this. And so we wrap at our ending though, where he refuses the serum. He's like, no, I just want you to get a better version for me. I don't want you to cure me. I just need you to keep powering me up. So I don't want to eat people or whatever, but I got to go out here and kill people. And then, we get the little epilogue where he's in Moscow or whatever. I'm like, well, okay, Blade in the snow. Like, of course, blood in the snow is always like a great effect. So let's do that. That should have been next. And but no, it's a satisfying end to a again, what's been a really fast paced movie, and sort of amazing how quickly it goes by.
Yeah, every time I see 2 hour runtime, I'm like, no way, it's like an hour 40, hour 45, right? No, it's like but it helps when you've seen a movie like 20, 30 times because they start going by faster and faster too. I feel like, so maybe I'm the wrong person to judge, but to me, it like feels like it flies by in like an hour or something.
Absolutely. I feel the same way about some other movies that I really like that are in the same genre. They just fly by. So, but this podcast is flown by too, Matt. It's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for Blade? And for those who are new to the show, and Matt, since you're new to us, the bigger the popcorn, the better the movie, and feel free to modify it any way you want.
Final thoughts, I guess I would just say I still love this movie. It holds up amazingly. There's a lot of movies when I was a kid that don't hold up. Blade is not one of those. I think it still holds up with people. I don't know. Like, I'd be curious, somebody who's never seen it, who's like a teenager, like early 20s, never saw it. If it's still cool. I hope it's still cool. Because late 90s it was like 10 out of 10 cool. And I love, this one, Blade 2. I'm with you. Blade Trinity can go just into the sun as far as I'm concerned. But the Blade 1 and 2 were great. This one is amazing. Wesley Snipes is the best. I just cannot fathom anyone else's Blade. Definitely watch it if you've not seen it. So, and can I the largest tub of popcorn I could give it, like
that'd be the extra large,
collector's tin with like Blade face on it, like a super special extra large size of popcorn, because I love this movie so much.
That is awesome. I agree with a lot of your thoughts. This movie is incredibly watchable, and it's fun to go back to something that's so many years beyond its time and still be able to find so much fun in it. And that's the thing, is this movie doesn't take itself too seriously, and I fear like anything they do now is going to be way overwrought, and I'm like, no, don't do that. Like, just keep this fun. This should be fun, and it's incredibly fun. Snipes is awesome in it. He kills in it, pun intended. And Steven Dorff is just so much fun as this bad guy. Like, Frost is such a cool character, and you almost hate that they blew him up like a balloon at the end, because he would have been good to come back as again, like Vampire Kingpin, like we talked about. But we got to move on to other things. But everybody else in this is a lot of fun too. They're clearly having a good time, and like you say, infinitely watchable. I'm going to give it a big, large popcorn. I think it's a lot of fun. And if you haven't seen it, by George, please go seek it out and watch it. But if it's been a while, definitely worth a revisit. And if you want to do something different during your October scary movie time or whatever, this is a good one to kind of break up the monotony of your slasherdom or, zombies, whatever you're into watching this time of year. That's why we're kicking off Shocktober with it. Matt, once again, thank you for coming on the show. Tell folks how they can follow you and Film Feast.
Okay, so thank you again for having me, by the way. This was a lot of fun. So if you want to follow Film Feast, we have great guests like Jay, Carmelita, Valdez McCoy, and Mike Scott, people that have been on Film Strip, and lots of other great people I've had on. But the podcast, usually new episodes drop every Monday. You can find it, I think, basically anywhere you get podcasts. I think we're like basically everywhere now. I think we got all bases covered. So Film Feast podcast. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Film Feast Pod. You can follow me on Twitter at MattBlood87. You can follow me and the podcast on Instagram at Film Feast, all one word. And that's our stuff. And like I said, we're usually posting every week. So I take some breaks here and there just to, just for my own mental health. But I try to get an episode out every once a week. So strong recommend on the podcast as well. And again, Matt, thanks for coming and being a part of this. You can find all the links to that in the show description. Folks, you can follow this show's social media at Film Strip Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. There you're going to find announcements about upcoming shows, cool things we've got going on. You'll find a link to our Letterboxd page, which contains our entire list of reviews. Go to filmstrippodcast.com. That'll take you to our Anchor distribution site. We're everywhere, Apple, Spotify, Google, all the places. Share the show if you can. If you can leave us a positive review, it always helps other people find the podcast. We appreciate this support. For Matt Bledsoe, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Filmstrip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Filmstrip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.